Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Fight Right. We're so excited that you get to watch this interview. We actually premiered it live with a full audience of people and had just a great time with conversation with him. So here's what you're about to watch. You're about to watch the full interview with me and Jimmy and the Gottmans. And then we're going to have 30 minutes where we took live questions with everyone present and just had a great conversation. So, Jimmy, anything you want to tell the good people before we launch into it?
No, I mean, well, yeah, I have a lot to say, obviously. So, obviously, as we all know, conflict is inevitable in our relationship. I think I wrote, what did I write down in this book? They say intimacy inevitably creates conflict, but conflict is our greatest opportunity for intimacy. Um, and the way we handle conflict is just so vital. I mean, I feel like conflict gives us an opportunity to either grow closer to each other, or unfortunately, it will create distance if we do it incorrectly. So I love what the Gottmans, I love their whole brand of conflict, avoiding the four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Um, but more importantly, not just avoiding bad things, but also interjecting positive things in your relationship, like admiration and curiosity and understanding each other's love maps. This stuff isn't just add-ons if we get around to it, or, well, it would be nice if my partner cared about how I was actually feeling. Unfortunately, no. This stuff is vital to our relationship surviving and thriving. When we love someone, I believe that comes with a responsibility. It comes with requirements. One of those requirements would be, like John Gottman says, when you're in pain, the world stops and I listen. Validating people's feelings, honoring their experience. It's all that stuff that's so important. And we need to be very, very careful how we handle conflict because, like they'll see in the video, it can change the entire trajectory of the relationship if we do it incorrectly.
Yeah, so well put, Jimmy. That's great. I'm excited for you all to see it. Enjoy. Oh, so happy to be here with just this incredible group of faces. Been following all of your work, Dr. John and Julie Gottman. Been following your work very closely for years now. I've taken your Gottman level 1 and level 2 trainings. Have read your books throughout school. I'm a super fan over here, so I'm just
Oh,
thrilled.
that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. That's very
So,
kind of you.
Yeah, so happy to be here. And Jimmy, of course, we've been corresponding a lot recently, and you're making waves in this social media sphere, just helping me kind of make sure these ideas get to reach as many people as possible.
that's my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, go ahead, kick it off. We're excited to talk.
Yeah, so obviously we're all so excited to have the Gottmans with us. So anyone that's read your book, I'm sure they'll love it. But in the book, you talk about how important it is to the happiness and success of our relationship to turn towards our partner's bids for connection. Can you talk some more about some of the most common bids that are missed and why some people are more likely to see their partner's bids and maybe others are more likely to miss them?
Hmm. You know, I'm not sure that there are any bids for connection that are missed in particular more than any other bids. I think it's more about the state of the relationship, Jimmy, that when people have a good relationship, then they are kind of mildly aware of their partner, where their partner is. Is their partner in another room? Is their partner calling out to them? So they tune in to where their partner is. And folks who have a really unhappy relationship may be more withdrawn and not necessarily turning towards their partners uh, really for many bids at all. What we saw in our research when we brought couples into an apartment lab for about 24 hours and we videotaped them during the hours that they were awake, we found that successful couples down the road turned towards each other in the apartment lab 86% of the time. Couples who were unhappy turned towards each other 33% of the time. So listen to that huge difference. It's really more about, are you aware of your partner and what they need and if they're reaching out to you versus are you not?
Sometimes it's really kind of innocent, just turning away. somebody's just so involved in what they're doing or reading, or they're just thinking, about themselves. And so they actually don't hear their partner call their name or, make a bid for connection. So when people realize how important it is, then they can increase their awareness and become more sensitive to their partner's bids for connection. But I think a lot of times it's not mean-spirited when people turn away. It just may be that they're just involved in their own thoughts. But when you change that awareness and people turn toward bids a lot more, they really build, excuse me, an emotional bank account in the relationship that really pays off during conflict and gives them the ability to laugh at themselves and have shared humor, which is very powerful at reducing physiological arousal during conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
That's so good. I think like when I first heard this idea of turning towards, it almost felt like a little too simple to be true. Like clearly I have to have these very complicated communication techniques or this, like the biggest problem in my relationship are these hard arguments that I don't know how to solve. Like that, if I could just solve that, then we would just be smooth sailing. And then coming into contact with that data the first time I read it, I'm like, man, could I really fill the bank account with something that feels so simple? And I remember trying it out, not telling my wife, just kind of running an experiment myself and just paying special attention to try to hit that ratio 5-1. It's like, can I respond to these bids in a positive way, not necessarily with an overly enthusiastic way, but just like you said, turning towards, and what kind of impact would that have?
What did you notice?
Oh,
Well,
just
wait a sec, Matthias. Let me just interrupt for 1 second. During non-conflict time, the actual ratio you're trying to hit is 20-1.
thanks for that.
During conflict,
Right.
it's 5-1.
Yeah,
So there's
great.
even more positivity that really helps a relationship.
Well,
That's a really great.
what did you notice, Matthias, when you turned toward your wife more?
I noticed that she was less. This is going to sound a little funny, but she was less irritated when I genuinely did like kind of forget things. I'm just kind of a forgetful person. I'm a little clumsy. And so she'll ask me to take out the trash and then I'll get distracted cutting bread or something. And then she'll be like, did you take out the trash? I'm like, oh yeah. And I kind of get back to it. Normally there's a little bit of teeth behind like a comment like, God, you forgot to take out the trash. But I felt like, whoa, it's like 20 or 30% lighter. She's just a bit more gentle and like, hey, the trash. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And it's like, whoa, she's way more gentle with me. And it's not like, that made we didn't have a big, deep conversation about it. It was like the temperature of the whole room just dropped a few degrees. Have you seen that as well in your observations?
Absolutely. What we have seen is that all of that turning toward that you're doing allows your partner to feel cared about, to feel like you are interested in her or him or them. To really feel turned towards is a real gift that you're giving to your partner. So it's a very, very positive thing to do, even though it's so simple, it's so easy. Most people aren't really aware that how powerful it actually is, right? The other thing that we saw is that when partners really turn towards each other a lot, the way you have with your wife, what we also see is that during conflict discussions, there's a lot more lightness that carries over into those discussions too. There's more humor, there's more laughing at yourself, it's gentler, people don't get as flooded. It's much easier to talk about issues when you've got that emotional bank account nice and full.
Yeah. I know that, Jimmy, you were talking about the gentle startup when you and I were chatting just about the insights we were getting from this book. You had a question for him. Do you want to throw it out their way?
Sure. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, I can remember that question. So you said a fascinating quote in the book, or I quoted a fascinating book from you. You said that we found that 96% of the time how the fight went over the course of the first 3 minutes determined not only the fight's trajectory, but how the rest of the relationship would go 6 years down the line. I feel like we don't fully appreciate how serious it is that we handle conflicts in a healthy, respectful way.
Yeah, I think that's really true.
I
And
mean, yeah. So can you talk more about kind of the correlation?
some of the time it's really that people don't want to make waves. They don't want to disturb the relationship. They want to have a peaceful evening together. So they stifle their irritability, their needs, and, don't want to bring those things up. And then when you're in that state of having stifled, what you need, then your irritability builds more. Your anger builds more. It's under pressure. And so there's a lot of good research that shows that suppression of your emotion that way, even though you're doing it to be kind, you're not bringing up a lot of stuff to upset your partner, it actually, in the long run, leads you to start a conflict discussion with so much more pressure that you're in attack mode. And that really determines how the discussions are going to go this enormous percentage of time, 96% of the time.
Yeah, let me also add that the way that couples may make a mistake in how they bring up conflict that, is troublesome is they start it with criticism or even contempt. And that sabotages them getting listened to. So listen to the difference between these. God, you are so lazy. You never clean up the kitchen. What's the matter with you? Okay, so how is your partner going to respond to that, right?
Not great.
Yeah, not great. They're just going to counterattack, or they'll withdraw, or they'll say, well, I cleaned it up last week, whatever. That is not the response that you're looking for, right? But what we saw in the successful couples in that first 3 minutes is they brought up an issue in a totally different way. They never pointed their finger at the partner. Instead, they described themselves. And here's the way they did it. They started with, I feel something. So notice the I instead of you. I feel upset. I feel stressed. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I'm angry. And then they describe the situation that was creating those feelings, the situation, not the personality flaw of the partner. So it would sound like, I'm really feeling upset that the kitchen is a mess. The kitchen is a mess is a neutral statement, right? It's not blaming. It's just the kitchen is a mess. Then the third step, they would say what they need from their partner, but they would make it a positive need, not a negative need. And let me tell you what that means. A negative need is when you say what you don't want, what you resent, what you don't like. Instead, flip that on its head and say your positive need, which typically is a concrete way your partner can shine for you.
Mhm.
What is the positive thing that would make you feel better? That's what you're asking of your partner. So the whole thing put together would sound like, I'm feeling really stressed out that the kitchen is a mess. Would you please clean it up? Simple as that. But no blame and no criticism, because the minute you slide into that, your partner is going to end up feeling attacked, just like John described. And then your partner will go defensive and not hear what you're needing.
Can I add something to what you said?
Sure.
I'm thinking of this one videotape, just to make this really concrete, of this couple who are talking about savings versus spending money. And the wife starts off by reassuring him. She says, I really appreciate that you're saving a lot of your inheritance that you got. And, and so that we have this nest egg. And he says, well, gee, thanks for proving my point. And she said, yeah, I really do appreciate it. I'm not kidding. I think you're doing a great job with the savings, but, can't we take some amount? I mean, you could save everything or you could spend everything, but there's got to be an in-between place. Can't we find some some amount that we spend on just having fun now, because I'm feeling really frustrated. We just, there's too much drudgery. I want us to have a lot more fun now. And he says, yeah, okay, well, name me a percent that we would spend. And she says, oh, really? Okay. Well, 15%. And he says, you got it. That's their whole conflict discussion. She started off by reassuring him, even complimenting him, and then talking about what she felt and what she needed. And he just said, all right, that makes a lot of sense.
If I can interject real quick, going back to Dr. Julie's point, when I feel like men are even more sensitive to, like when my wife tells me a positive need, I feel like I'm so much more likely. It gives me a sense of I get to do this for her, or I get to fulfill this, and that's it. There's something in me that wants to accomplish that more than when she brings up if it was a negative need. So you're absolutely right.
Let me also add, Jimmy, that, and it's wonderful to hear that she addresses positive needs with you. But what it also does when she asks for something from you that's positive is she's also saying under the surface, I trust you. I think you're a good person. I think you will turn towards me. You are my chosen person. I really value you. That's the effect also. It makes the person that's hearing the need feel really good about themselves, as well as feeling more connected to your partner.
And as a guy, I think we want a way to earn points with our partner. So when she gives us a recipe,
right.
Right.
Okay,
give me the map.
That's something I can do. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was reflecting on how to incorporate this idea when we're thinking about the past and arguments that we have over events that have already happened when we're trying to repair. And something that occurred to me, and I'm wondering if you've said this in a different place or how you would put it this way, but I'm like, it's easier to talk about what I wish happened rather than my interpretation of the negative thing that happened. So instead of, gosh, you were so rude to me in front of my mom, which is a criticism, to say, like I wanted to feel more supported when we were with family during that conversation. Talking about what I wanted in that's positive seems to run parallel to this idea. Could you maybe share your reflection on that, or how you approach similar things when talking about the past things you're taking issue with without turning that into a criticism?
You bet. That's a wonderful question, Matthias, and a question that a lot of people need, because when we have what John and I call regrettable incidents in the past that we never talk about, we never really fully process, what ends up happening is it sticks in your mind like glue. It does not go away. That memory is very strong and intense, and it festers inside, almost like an abscess. So in our book, we give the actual exact way to process a regrettable incident in a successful way. First of all, each partner takes a turn expressing what they felt during the incident. And we make that very easy by providing a list of emotions that you might have felt. And all you need to do is to read which ones you had during this incident right off the list. That's all. Step two, each person takes a turn describing their experience of what happened. They do not criticize their partner. They don't blame their partner. So there's a lot of I. It's going to sound like this. I was standing at the sink doing the dishes. I heard you come in, and I turned around and I saw this angry look on your face. I remember asking you, what's the matter? Is something wrong? And I heard you say, just be quiet and leave me alone. And then I watched you walk into the living room. I was scared. I didn't know what was wrong. So notice everything is about I. I felt, I heard, I remember, I imagined. That's okay too.
A good one.
And that's where you could also do what Matthias is suggesting. I wish what had happened.
Nope, nope, nope. That's not right. Just wait.
Glad
Just
we're
I
getting to the
disagree
bottom
with
of it.
her.
Yeah,
John,
let's get
step
into the weeds.
5. Step 5.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah,
Am I right?
that's true.
Yeah. Haha. So,
great.
okay. Yeah. Step 3 is so each person then has a chance to describe their experience while the other person listens. And the other person listening, it's a good idea for them to take notes so they really hear it, because after the first speaker is finished, the second person, the listener, needs to summarize what that first person said as well as they can. And then by putting themselves in their partner's shoes, say a few words of validation. Validation does not mean you agree with that person's perception. It could be as different as night and day. But you can also say, from your point of view, I can see why you felt that way. That makes sense to me. Those are words of validation. Then step 3, each person takes a turn thinking about what feelings they had and looking for what we call triggers in the feelings they had. And triggers refer to feelings you have that may have started long before this relationship, may have started in childhood or another relationship. And those feelings typically are things like feeling rejected or abandoned or judged or criticized or disliked, unattractive. There's all kinds of feelings that we grow up perhaps experiencing that stay inside of us like scar tissue. And scar tissue is very brittle. So if you push on it, it tears again. And during a fight, that can happen where those feelings come up again. So if anything got triggered for you, you share that with your partner and where those old feelings may have gotten started. Step 4, finally, is taking responsibility for your part in this discussion or this fight, regrettable incident. And taking responsibility is interesting. It doesn't come until after you've heard the impact of your words or whatever your action was on your partner. Then you know what you're apologizing for. So you don't want to apologize right away. We wait until you've really fully described each of you, your own experience. Then the apology makes much more sense. So step 4 is taking responsibility for what you contributed to this and apologizing. And then finally, step 5, and here's the good part, where each of you can tell your partner one thing that they can do differently next time to avoid this from happening again, and what you yourself want to do differently next time to avoid this. Each person just says one thing, and you don't want to hear, I want you to transform your personality. No, it's got to be something very small, like, just specifically say what you need. That would really be helpful for me, whatever it is. So that's where you're looking into the future. And after that, you're probably going to feel a whole lot better about that incident.
So we can't start with, oh, here's what I wish you did in this circumstance, past tense. We actually got to get into understanding what it was like for our partner to be in that circumstance and listening and attending to that first, taking responsibility.
Yeah, Julie's right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, taking responsibility for what we're bringing to that interaction. And then instead of trying to nitpick what should have happened in the past to change it, we understand the triggers that happened and how that might have activated past stuff, and then cast our vision towards the future, kind of our dream, we wish the future to look like. And that's how we kind of step past some of those landmines that get us stuck in a bunch of conflict. Am I summarizing that okay?
What a great listener you are, Matthias. That's exactly right.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you. I have one more question, Jimmy. Anything else that's front of mind for you?
No, keep going.
Yeah, well, okay, so gridlocks, stalemates. We get into these arguments. We try to repair the best we can, but sometimes it feels like we have the same argument over and over, and that spans over years, sometimes decades, and we are tempted to kind of just let it go and avoid it. Like, gosh, it seems like every time we bring this up, it gets worse.
Right.
So what hope would you say for folks where it's like, it's the arguments we can't get past. It's kids. It's living near parents. It's stuff that seems tied to personality. What do you have to say to folks in that situation?
Well, it's interesting because before we really approached this problem, you would see these gridlock conflicts, and clinicians would have written books about this, about how to deal with these gridlock conflicts. And they would basically say, well, the reason these couples get gridlocked is that, they have some kind of psychopathology. They're narcissistic, they're not able to empathize, they're, uh, have borderline personality disorder, or some other pathology. And what we discovered was that people don't compromise for good reason. There's a good reason why they're not compromising. And that reason is that underneath the position on the issue, there is a set of beliefs, a set of wishes, a set of hopes, a longing of how they want things to be. And that is very central to their sense of self. And so if you can uncover those hidden agendas, the hidden meanings that are there in a position, then you can find a way to really compromise that honors both people's core needs within that conflict. And we discovered it first in ourselves, when we had a gridlock conflict that lasted for years. And, we went to therapy, couples therapy, and the therapist once turned to me and said, John, you can say no to Julie. Create a boundary. Boundaries are what make relationships work. And I remember going home and saying, do I sound like her? And Julie said, yeah, you do. And I said, well, I don't want a relationship based on boundaries. I want to figure out how we can solve this conflict. There's got to be some solution. And so we came up with our own solution.
And we fired the therapist.
Right. And that's the Dreams Within Conflict intervention, which really helps couples go deeper. And we give this example in the book of this couple whose relationship broke up about whether to get a dog or not and how to take care of the dog, when actually the hidden agendas for each of them were so sensible. She wanted really to start a family with him, and he wanted freedom to travel with her and not be encumbered. But they never got to those hidden dreams. They just fought about who's going to take care of the dog. It wasn't about the dog.
Right. I just want to add that in our studies, in our research, where couples came back year after year or every 2 to 3 years for as long as 20 years, we saw that 69% of all problems couples struggle with are perpetual issues. They never go away, never. And the reason they exist are usually differences between personality or lifestyle preferences. And so when these couples came back, they would be discussing the same thing in the lab over and over and over again over the decades. The only thing that changed was their hairstyle and maybe their fashion style. That was it. The only thing that changed. So they just keep having the same conversation. But John is really right. When you stay on the surface of one of these perpetual issues, then you bet it's going to get gridlocked. So it's so important to go deep down into understanding the roots of your partner's position on the issue and their background history, their dreams, and so on. And this is part of why we say in our book that fighting is the royal road to connection. which is very counterintuitive. You think fighting is going to separate you, but it actually doesn't when you dive deep, like John is describing, and unearth things you may not have known about your partner that are very important as to who they are. That can create much more understanding, much more compassion, and it gentles down the process of then reaching a compromise because that understanding is in place now.
They fight right.
They
Right.
fight right. That
And if
feels
I can just chime in real quick, when we talk about going deeper and understanding our partner better and asking all those deep and meaningful questions, like you say in all of your books, what you have to have already established is that trust, with each other. And when you have that trust, then that creates such a safe environment to actually be able to have those deep conversations.
Yeah.
That's true. But Jimmy, I want to add also that the reverse is also true, that doing this process creates more trust.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
That's very important, right? Because your partner may be doing a lot of things that make you angry, make you upset, maybe diminish your trust to some degree. But with these kinds of questions and deeper exploration of who your partner is and what their core needs are and what their core dreams are, you get why they're doing those things. And it begins to rebuild your trust or to create more trust. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We have so enjoyed this time with you. So generous of you both to hop on a call and get to talk. I'm sure that everyone watching has gotten their notepads out and is jotting down different points. Fight Right is the book that you guys just wrote. I just saw that it hit the New York Times list. Congrats on that. We're just so happy for you. And
Thank you.
going to be
Thank
given
you
away
so
at the
much.
top, I think, of this as well for those who are at the live event. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you,
Matthias. Thank you,
guys.
Jimmy.
Thanks for a wonderful interview, guys. Take care.
You too.
Hello, sir.
Hi there.
Nice to see you.
Do you think it's working?
I think it's working. All right. Well, let's start this. So we had some Q&A in the chat. Some questions were popping in. Were there any questions that, I don't know, popped out to you that you thought were interesting that you wanted to take on?
Yeah, sure. What if I use the correct statements, like I'm using a soft startup and I say I feel, instead of using criticism or contempt, instead of attacking their character, I say I felt X. I felt neglected when you did X, Y, and Z, or I felt abandoned when you didn't call me. You stayed late at work. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take my headphones off because I can hear my echo, and that's never gonna be able to speak. Anyways, my point is I used the I feel statement, but I still got met with defensiveness. So this is a super important question. Here's the problem. From my standpoint, it takes two for this thing to work. So we can practice all of the great habits that we want to. We can use all the correct techniques, but I believe both people have a role in conflict, and it's my job to bring things up in a respectful, vulnerable way and tell you how I'm feeling. It's also your partner's job to listen when you say something that's important to you. It's their job to listen. If you care about somebody, you have to put aside your ego and actually listen to what they're saying. That's why it's so beneficial when somebody tells you something in a vulnerable and respectful way, that you respond in a kind, receptive way. And so if someone's responding with defensiveness when I say, hey, like I felt this, people will say, well, I can't make you feel like you choose your own feelings. I'm not responsible for your feelings. While that's true, when we care about somebody, if Matthias said, hey, it really hurt my feelings when you did this the other day, if I really care about that friendship with him, then I have to put aside my ego and say, tell me more about how that impacted you. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Here's a good quote that John Gottman says. Quote, he says this about his wife, Julie. When you're in pain, the world stops and I listen. And that's such a good, I think about that all the time when Emily comes to me with something that I did that I unintentionally hurt her feelings in some way. I think conflict is so often about somebody else is in pain. They're trying to tell you that this hurt, whether it was intentional or not, it doesn't matter at this point. You unintentionally hurt your partner that you care about. So we have to curb our defensiveness. And while the way we do that is by getting to the root cause of why we're so defensive. And Matthias, I would love for you to take, I feel like I'm rambling, so I'd love for you to take that on. How do we get to the root cause of our defensiveness, Matthias?
Oh, I was going to talk about I feel statements, but I can loop that in too. Because I liked what you were saying about the idea that I feel statements really don't work unless you have both people in on it. The way that I've always said that is it's not that I feel statements work. If what we mean by work is they're going to then do what I want them to do, or they're going to then respond the way I want them to respond, or they're going to agree with me, or they're going to finally see me, then it's like, yeah, they don't work. I'm just saying all the other alternatives always produce something worse. And that's actually, I think, really important to key in on. It's like I could come at you and just say like, hey, you pathetic piece of garbage, like da 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 da. That's like, you might say, well, I feel statements don't work, but I'm like, yeah, calling them pathetic garbage really doesn't work either. Or the passive aggressive comments, they don't work. The subtle little hints followed by the cold shoulder and not talking to them, that doesn't work. And so we're working with a bunch of different options that have an imperfect success rate. If we measure success by, well, I'm gonna get them to do what I want them to do. And so what I feel statements do is that they kind of rightly divide the line of where your domain of control is. I can't control you. I can't label you. I'm not going to put the blame of all this on you. I'm just going to name what's true of my experience. And then that's really the best package that then you can lob over to your partner for them to then catch and be responsible with. But of course, you can't make someone catch what you're handing them. You can come at somebody as gentle as you know how to be, and they can still use that in ways that aren't healthy. So that's certainly the case with I feel statements. Usually it just practically, if you're like in a spot where you're like, oh man, I'm like, hey, I really felt like, or I feel unseen, unheard, and the other person's like, well, I can't control how you feel. I think that is just not true. For some reason, I think that feels like a stalemate. Like, I gotcha. Like, I got you on a logical truth that I can't make you feel anything. But the reality is we can certainly influence how our partners feel. You're right. We can't objectively control, but we can influence. And we are responsible for our influence.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I mean, at the end of the day, sorry, for anyone who wonder, I'm having like so many echoes in my ear, so I'll have to take these off. I'll just look at Matthias if he's like, if he waves at me, Jimmy, you've been talking for too long. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about, and Gottman goes over this, if you've ever read any Gottman stuff, I mean, he goes over this so many times of how empathy is central to all of this. I mean, like we have to be empathetic towards our partner's inner world and experience and perspective and feelings. And the best way, like you were saying, really, we don't have that many options when you're sharing your experience. Like we're all going to be hurt in different times. We're all going to be hurt in different ways. And it's so crucial that we feel safe to bring that up to our partner. I mean, that's a sign of a good friendship. Like Matthias and I are trying to develop a good friendship here. And I want him to feel safe that he can come to me and tell me something. If something rubbed him the wrong way, or if we did something and he kind of created a story, like I felt like I felt like, something happened here, I would want him to feel safe. So that's the crux of the issue. If I don't do counseling, somebody else could tell you this better than I do, but I feel like the first step in any relationship is, are we actually at a place where we both feel safe to be honest with each other? Now, the next step to that is, sure, we can be honest with each other. I can be honest and call you a jerk. Like, I think you're a lazy piece of crap. That's being honest. Is that helpful? Is that you know, we can take that to a more healthy place. Like I can be honest, but also come at it from an emotionally regulated place where I take responsibility for my feelings. I lead with in a lot of Doc Gottman books, he talks about leading with like give your partner the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Like let's not have such a negative bias towards our partner that we've created this story that we're all looking for them to mess up. They messed up again because they're a lazy, selfish narcissist. And I'm looking for that to feed that narrative. That's not the fondness and admiration that the Gottmans talk about, you know? So the best thing we can do is to make sure to remind them right off the bat. And some people will say you're treating them like a baby or you're giving them too much ground, but we should really start off the bat with, I don't blame you for this. I'm not saying all this is your fault. But then lead into, but if I'm being honest with you, this is how I feel about this situation. And like I said before, there's two roles. You did your role. If the other person doesn't do their role, then connection and closeness won't materialize. You're not going to have connection with somebody who doesn't want to respond to you in a curious, empathetic validation, trying to understand your perspective. You're just not going to have closeness with that person in any relationship, if friendship, intimate relationship. And so I don't know. Hit me with another question with those, or I'll hit you with one.
Here's a question that I want to hit you with first is who gets the first giveaway? Because for those of you who know, we're actually giving away 5 signed copies by the Gottmans to your door on the house to 5 lucky winners here today. So do you want to just call someone out in the chat?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I wrote a name down, but I wrote a name down. Aspen Landis. That's the first person.
Yes. I was actually going to pick Aspen as well. Aspen,
you are
how about that?
Doing great.
Woo! You know what? I'm gonna double up and say that Tyler Rivard also gets a copy. Tyler, I see you in the chat. You get a copy. You get a copy. All right. 2 copies given away. We're gonna be giving away
I love that.
3 more copies here in time. Let's get another question on the books though. I heard someone, I think it was Aspen who asked it, but it might have been someone else. Who was saying like, okay, but yeah, like what do I do if I'm trying to use these I feel statements, like, and I'm trying to kind of do this, like, I hear that the Gottmans keep saying that you need to validate your partner, but how can you validate something that's wrong? How can you validate something when when you totally disagree? Like, am I supposed to just lie? And here's how I answer this question, and Jimmy, I want to hear how you answer it. Is like, we're not validating the truth claims, we're validating the experience. And what John Gottman would say, and he said this in the interview, is it's validation isn't about agreeing with their interpretation. It's about saying, I can see how you experience it that way. Oh, I'm validating right now that I'm getting what you're giving me. I'm validating right now that I'm receiving the message, the relay of your experience in the world. And that's confusing. I think validation can kind of trip people up. Another word that you could just replace it with that felt confusing was just like accepting that that's where they're at and accepting that that's their point of view. And again, it's not accepting it as in I think what we assume with validation or acceptance is if I validate it, if I accept it, if I concede, then I'm giving them control and then I'm letting them write the narrative. And I just don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think that if both people are only willing to listen to a narrative they agree with, they're just going to be listening to themselves. But if both people can be open to listening to something that differs from their point of view and is gentle and receptive towards that without feeling the pressure to like become the same thing, then that difference can emerge in a respectful, safe way.
I love that. Yeah. So I read something in one of the Gottman books when I was just looking back on my research, and I don't know if this was Julie or John talking, but they said, instead of saying, you never touch me, say, I love it when you touch me this way. Or I've been feeling neglected lately. I feel like we haven't really snuggled or we haven't had a lot of touch, and I've really missed that. And I would love it if we could plan some time to touch or whatever, fill in the blank. Here's the problem. This is why it's so important that you lead the correct way. Because if you lead in a way, if you lead with an aggressive, critical, contemptuous, like this, you never touch me anymore, you're so selfish. How is someone supposed to validate that? It's very difficult. If you're on the receiving end of that, you're like, even if you wanted to validate that, you're like, okay, so I never touch you because I'm so selfish. Is that what you're saying? And they're like, yeah. So, but then you've painted yourself in a negative light. That's why it's so important that we talk about those roles. It's so important that one person comes at you with a feeling, because if someone comes at you with a feeling, while people do still argue that, like if you said, hey, I've been feeling rejected lately right by you, or I've been feeling, someone could say, I'm not rejecting you. And that's turning against your partner. Turning towards your partner, if someone offers you a feeling, you shouldn't tell them that they're not allowed to have that feeling. You should, validation is saying, I'm attributing value to that experience and perspective and feeling. So then you can launch into more, tell me more about how this situation impacted you or made you feel. But it's very difficult to validate somebody who doesn't, if you're not saying it the right way, then you're putting your partner at a disadvantage. You know, if Emily says, you never touch me, you selfish jerk, it's difficult for me to validate that without feeling like I'm incriminating myself. So if she leads with a feeling, I should respond to her by appreciating that perspective. I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Are you, and that's that difference of like, well, I can't control how you feel. It's like, well, you can control your influence. And I think that all we can ever do is be as intentional as we can with the influence we do have in a relationship to set people up to respond in the way that's most healthy. And something that I think I've really learned in total from the Gottmans is you have to stay safe. Like safety is the undergirding environment of intimacy and closeness, resolving conflicts, getting to agreement. If people are feeling agitated, threatened, if they fall into something called diffuse physiological arousal, it's going to make that process of coming together harder and harder, depending on how hard you push it. So by offering I feel statements, you offer a gentle exchange that the other person then can receive and validate. And I just want to acknowledge too, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, that sounds great in a perfect world, like, can I just be the first one to say that I don't do this perfectly all the time? And that I've had an argument this week with my wife where I caught myself like, oh, there's a criticism. And I knew in my head I should be responding right now and like reflecting back and like leaning into some of these practices. And I remember that impulse of like, I don't want to. Because I just wanted to be right and I wanted to just say it. And I knew she was wrong and I wanted to point it out. And when you're in the moment, it's so hard to pull upon these just kind of these pillars of what builds healthy connection. And that's why I think it actually has to run deeper than just knowing enough communication skills or knowing the right phrasing on everything. There really does have to be a deep heart commitment to wanting to have a different kind of interaction.
And if I can touch on that, the Gottmans, I love how John talks about repair techniques all the time. And one of the repair techniques that always stood out in my mind is simply just saying, you know what? I think I started this wrong. Like, can we start over? Like, what a beautiful thing. Can you imagine a conflict where both people were so self-reflective and so respectful of the other partner that they would just be able to say, hey, you know what? Like, I don't think I did that. I don't think I said that right. And here's what I wish I would have said instead. So during a conflict like that, I love how they talk about, I mean, it seems unattainable. They talk about the 5-to-1 ratio. You need to have 5 positive things going on in the ratio to every one. Yeah.
Jimmy, Julie corrected me on this in our interview. Do you remember?
I do remember.
She called me out. She's like, it's not 5. What
Yeah.
number was it? What number was it?
20.
Do you remember? It was 20. And I was like, oh, good grief. It's 20. But sorry, go on. Sorry to interrupt you. I just
No, I love that. No, I mean, so I would love to go over a little bit more about what those 5 interactions are, because sometimes it's like, what are 5 positive interactions during a conflict? So the things that come to my mind is, so soft startup would be a positive thing, you know, during a conflict. It can be, when it's appropriate, touching each other, sometimes non-aggressively, obviously. Just reaching out, if you try to hold hands with somebody and have a conflict, it's a little harder, you tend to feel a little closer. It can be smiling, it can be giving the benefit of the doubt, it can be using any of the repair techniques where you take responsibility for what you think you could have done different. Imagine if you have two people who actually are willing to take responsibility for what they can do different. I mean, that's what we all want, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all upset because we're willing to take responsibility, but we don't feel like our partner is. Or that's usually the primary thing people are upset about, and rightly so. I could go through countless examples of Emily and I's relationship when we both have been that partner where we weren't willing to, we were dug our heels in instead of simply saying, I care about what you're going through. I care when you're in pain, the world stops and I listen. So should we talk real quickly about what are some of the negatives that we need to avoid?
Well, I just wanted to point out, were you talking about in reference to conflict, like these?
Yeah.
Then that's funny because I got it wrong again, just on the other round. It's 5-1 in conflict, and then
Yeah.
20-1 when it's not in conflict.
Right.
All right, I'll get those numbers straight eventually.
Okay.
I appreciate you being, you were kind and generous.
And the 20-1, if you want to chat about that, the non-conflict times, we need to have a ratio of 20-1 positive to negative. And all of those things include turning towards our partner's bids for connection. So when they're telling us a story, we're actually paying attention. We put our phones down and we're not, imagine you staring at your phone while your partner's telling you a story. A lot of you have experienced this when you're like, oh, I got to tell you about my day. And they're like, oh yeah. And they're like still scrolling. And you're like, are you going to scroll while I was excited to tell you something? Like, why would I want to tell you? Why would I want to continue the story? I'm not more important than you scrolling Instagram. You haven't even found anything important. You're just scrolling for something. Like, of course that makes you feel completely devalued. So, it's those little moments that have the biggest impact. Like, that's turning towards your partner versus just completely turning against. Anyways, I don't know where that tangent was going.
No, it's true. I think, the Gottmans point out humor being a really great one. I often find that slowing down, like you were just pointing out, that like, hey, can I start over? Another one is just like, Julie actually, I think, said this in a lecture that I heard, where you're in kind of a moment where things are just feeling tense, and you can sense that like you're not saying everything the way that you wanted to say it, or they're not saying it the right way, or things aren't going well. And she just said, like, hey, I'm not trying to blame you. I'm not trying to come at you. And just almost like pausing the conversation for a minute. It's just like, I'm here because I just really want to get to the bottom of this with you. And I just want to remind you that we're okay. And almost just like a little bit of assurance just in the middle of it.
That is
It's
so
just,
true.
it was such a sweet thought. And I use that all the time where I'm having a conversation with Paige. It doesn't feel like it's going well. And then I can just pause and be like, hey, just by the way, I know this isn't feeling great right now. I just want to remind you that I love you, that we're in this. We're going to figure it out. I'm not coming at you. We're not against each other. We're going to do this together. I know you feel a lot of anger and tension from me right now. But that's not at you. I care about this too. We're like, just that reassurance, I think, in the middle. I know I respond so much to that too.
Reassurance in the middle is so important. What was I going to say? I can never hear because of the echo. But just reminding our partner that it's us versus the problem versus us versus each other. I mean, like, if you're not intentionally doing that, if you're not intentionally thinking, how can I make sure that my partner knows that we're a team in this during the conflict? I mean, that's just so important. We need to be cognizant and intentional about that.
Yeah, so well put. I'm thinking,
It wasn't.
I think James needs a book, because James Commenton probably, James Monlia or Monlia. James Monlia. You get a book. You've been committed this entire chat, copy paste. I'm on it. So
can I answer Aspen's question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
He said, I can try to understand, but if I don't, how do I agree? So you don't need to agree with your partner's experience to remind them that it's valuable to you. So that's the going back to feelings. Like if somebody tells you a feeling, you do not need to agree with why they're having that feeling. You don't need to agree. Does that make sense? Like they can someone's someone's ringing my doorbell, which means that my family can't get into my house. So
Oh yeah, you go ahead. I'll answer a question. You do your thing.
you answer that question.
Okay, great. So yeah, how do I agree? It's not so much that you're really trying to get to the place of perfect alignment and agreement. I think that the Gottmans talk about like something like 60 plus of your disagreements are actually not going to be, things that you come to see eye to eye on. But that's actually not the point. The goal isn't to perfectly align on every point of disagreement. It's to be able to hold love and closeness despite disagreement. So for example, like just put an example on this. Like I think something Paige and I have been talking a lot about recently. Um I heard Jim. I'll let him tell this. Hey,
Okay, back. What did I miss?
I was gonna give an example here of just this thing you were talking about. I was gonna give an example about an argument Paige and I have been having. We've been talking a lot about the idea of me getting a PhD.
Okay.
And I would love to go get a PhD at a school in the Northeast. That's where a lot of the fancy schools are. There's a couple researchers in New York in particular that I just love. So a guy named Joe Ledoux, he's a neuroscientist. Wendy D'Angela, she's incredible. There's just a lot of really cool people in New York. And so we've been talking about this idea of maybe like I part-time fly up to New York and study for a PhD up there, kind of part-time stay home. And she was just like, we have young kids right now. And I don't want you to be gone half the week in a lab in New York when we live here in Tennessee. And I don't think this is the season of life for it. And my response was like, of course I want to be with my kids. Of course I don't want them to grow up without dad around. But also this is something that I feel really passionate about. I would love to go and study. And I feel like it's not just like, oh, a good career move. It's something that I would really just kind of come alive to get to go study under some of the greats.
Mm.
And I think I have a rare opportunity where I might get accepted into some of those programs, and that would be just really awesome. And so we were just talking back and forth on that, and it became apparent to me that the goal was not that she has to like agree to let me go get a PhD or that she has to convince me to stay home and not get one. It's like, can I sense her heart and feel that longing for me to stay, not as her trying to like clamp me in or keep me from dreams or something, but as a desire to have me close. Like, because that actually takes a lot of the um, resistance out of it. It's like, she's like, I love you and I want you here. And it's not just, I want you here for the kids or this is what I think you should do or I'm trying to be controlling. It's just like, I want you to be close with me and here in our family. And then for me, it's not that I'm trying to kind of abandon or put work before the family or leave her behind and just go chase my dreams and not pay attention to how that has effects on her. It's that, wow, God made you, with this inquisitive mind and with these gifts and has these opportunities, and you want to make the most of that in this season. And I totally respect and understand and see that. And that gets me excited for you. Let's find a solution where both these dreams can be honored in the season that makes sense for both of us, given not just our lives, but the lives for our kids. And then even in the indecision, even in the places where it's like, I don't know what that means for the brass tacks, we're aligned and we feel loved by each other. And that's the difference. It's like in the arguments, can you leave the argument feeling loved by the other person even when you disagree? That actually the corner piece of disagreement isn't us versus them. It's us together. And it's almost like we can share the grief that the solution isn't immediately apparent. Like
That's beautifully said.
I talk to clients who they're really disagreeing on having kids, but they can see from the other person's perspective and they must share the grief of the indecision. What to do about sick parents, what to do about, differenting parenting styles. If you can have this warmth in where the other person's experience is molding them and molded their convictions and molding what they wanted to do, it's like, oh, okay, we don't know the answer now, but we know how to come near each other in the meantime. I think the sweet spot. At least that I'll just share a little bit of my own relationship. That's how I'm trying to work this out.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you touched on dreams, how important dreams are. I mean, like, I think that that's so vital that we care about our partner's dreams, obviously. Yeah, and you did that. I wanted to answer a quick question. How do we rebuild trust after a big fight that somebody asked? So the way I see it, we rebuild trust after a big fight by revisiting a moment of disconnection. I think that it's so important that we can be mature enough after a fight that we come to someone, but either person can initiate this. It's obviously it's best if both people are initiating instead of just one person always initiating this repair. But repair is essentially revisiting a moment of disconnection and kind of just like saying, I care about how all this happened. I care about how this impacted you. So tell me more about how this impacted you. Tell me what you were feeling during this big fight. Tell me what you wish would have happened different. Tell me what you need from me now to feel reconnected. And like, because those big fights are going to happen. You know, the Gottmans even say that just because you're in a healthy relationship doesn't mean that you're never going to do the four horsemen. I mean, obviously, contempt is the worst one, but like, we still get defensive, we still get critical, we still get overwhelmed, and we'll stonewall our partner, even if it's unintentionally. And it's not that the healthy couples never do those. It's that they can repair. It's that they can go back and say, the way I handled this, I didn't want to handle it that way. Like, so let's talk about it. Let's hash it out again. But in a more curious, validating way where at the least we ask them how about their experience. Just tell me about your experience, and we listen, and we don't argue with them. We don't, we're not combative. And that, I mean, how we rebuild trust after a big fight is obviously there's a lot there, but it essentially boils down to, I care about your experience, so I want to be a safe place where you can be honest about it.
Yeah. I think in that interview with Julie too, if you go back and rewatch on the replay, she kind of breaks down those 5 steps, and it's a really great, I mean, in the book too. I just really think if this is really kind of where you're at, if you're sitting here and you're realizing, whoa, some of these themes actually really are touching on my experience and like what my relationship is like, or you're wanting to put these skills and these ideas just kind of in your belt for down the road, like I would really recommend you grab the book. I know that we're going to have kind of the link to actually purchase the book in an email that's going to be sent out to you. I think that's going to be here in the chat too. If my assistant's here, she can post that in here. Let's give out another free copy though. Are you down to go for another 5 minutes before we close up today, Jimmy? And let's give out a book now, and then we'll close it out with the last book. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to pick the lucky soul who gets the last?
Yeah, I picked Zoraida Veras, Zoraida.
Wonderful. That's great. All right, I'm going to pick the last one, friends. So that'll come in the chat when you least expect it.
I'm reading a question. Sorry. If you have a question, let me know.
Yeah, do you want to pick one last question? We'll take it apart, both of us. Go ahead.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. I see one that says, what do I do if they don't bid for connection? That's an interesting question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
If they don't bid for connection, yeah. It can really feel overwhelming and disheartening when you feel like your partner's just kind of like lost the energy bug, is what I call it. Like people stop putting energy into the relationship. They're on their phone a lot. They don't really want to read the relationship books. They don't want to go to counseling. You kind of want them to go on a date, but it kind of feels like the bare minimum. You're trying to have a conversation. They don't really have thoughts. They don't really have reflections. They're just happy, like, oh yeah, thanks for sharing, but yeah, whatever. They kind of feel more like roommates. They feel like you're I don't know, you don't go do stuff together. And when you suggest going and doing stuff together, they kind of like, well, I'm tired, or I'm kind of stressed, or I'd rather just kind of stay at home. Like, can't we just watch TV? Can't we just like hang out and get a pizza? Like, whatever degree of that, even if it's 30%, in your relationship of that, there's really something important here that I think needs to be underlined. relationships do take energy. And if you're noticing that your partner is floating into the no energy zone, you have two options. You can have a direct conversation about the energy that you want to receive, or you can focus on putting energy into the relationship from your end and see if that sparks a reaction. And here's what I anticipate the gut impulse to be there when I suggest that is like, that's not fair. Like, what do you mean? I'm not getting energy and I'm taking care of the kids. I'm taking care of the house. I'm cooking meals, like, or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Maybe it's on the other and I'm working all day. Like I get no appreciation. I get no energy. And you're telling me to put more energy in. I'm already there trying to remind them of everything. I'm already there trying to like make sure da. And I'm saying, hold on. What's the energy they desire in the relationship? You have lots of energy you're putting in. You have lots of energy that's needed for your season of life. Maybe if it involves kids or what have you. But is there pockets of energy they really desire from you? And I'm not just talking about, physical intimacy. I'm talking about engagement, going to the game with them, watching the game, asking, details about their favorite players and I don't know, just some of the stats or their hobby interest. Like what I know about, you, Jimmy, is that you have lots of exotic plants, and those exotic plants are very hard to keep alive, and they all include very specific and regimented watering schedules and need very specific light, and they have different schedules of how much light and how little light, and some of them die, and that's really disheartening because they're thousands of dollars. I know you collect rare plants, and as someone who
don't,
also
but-
collected rare plants, you don't? Is it your wife?
Yeah,
It's your wife?
yeah. I don't know any of these plants.
Well, then me and your wife have a lot to talk about because I used to collect rare plants and I see them in your videos.
Yeah.
And I'm a little sad that you're not the one collecting them.
I'm really sorry. I'm people are going to be disappointed throughout this chat, and then I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
I'm a little heartbroken. I thought we had that interest and I was excited
Should we shut this whole thing down?
I thought we both liked plants. All right, I need to statement. I feel betrayed. So here's what I know. If here's a tip for you then, Jimmy. Just knowing some of those details of your wife's cool plants and not necessarily offering to help because she'll say no because they're very expensive plants that she probably got on eBay and barely nursed to life from getting them anyway. But just like knowing the different names of those complicated plants and enjoying them and then pointing out to when they have new leaves and when they're in bloom and enjoying that with her is something that we don't innately think to put energy into.
100%.
That's because maybe if it's not in your center of interest, then we don't think to get super involved. But when you get really involved, not just in like the hobbies, but in just the life, the things that light your partner up, you put a lot of energy into those things. It really does turn the tides. It creates a completely different energy in the relationship and sparks like a lot of affection and love and interest. And that is often reciprocated by receiving partners who love their spouses or their partners. Like it's there's a chemical reaction that happens in the relationship when you look for ways to put in energy in unconventional places, and it does spark something. And so I think if you're sitting here and you're listening, you're like, oh, I'd love for my partner to know the name of my complicated plants, or to care that I made him a pillow sham, or I made him a sweater or a hat, or to care that I this, that, and the other. Look for those pockets of his or her interest and get involved. You're not getting involved in dirt bikes or in the guitar or whatever because you care about dirt bikes. You're getting involved because you care about what they care about. You care about them. You care about why they care. And I've given that advice to dozens of couples, specifically, individuals that I see in counseling where they're complaining about their spouse or partner. And of those who have followed the advice, none have come back sad. All of them have come back and say, wow, I had no idea there was a whole dimension to my relationship that was literally right in front of me the whole time if I was willing to put in that energy. And It's not like the partner then reads their mind and puts in all the energy the next day into exactly the way they want it. But there's a chemical reaction. It creates movement where there was something frozen and kind of blocked up. The Gottmans would call that exploring each other's love maps. Like getting involved into the other's world. And I went on a big TED talk there. I got passionate, but go ahead.
I love it. I love when you talk. I'll let you ramble for hours. But I mean, yeah, you're obviously everything you said is right. I'm not going to add anything, but you're absolutely right. I don't care about these plants at all. But I care about how it makes Emily feel when I help her with she often needs help with the plants. She's got these big old plants and I'll help her carry them around, or I'll help her do the fertilizer or whatever. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like just caring about your partner's inner world, um, it's so important. But like you said, or like the question said, um, sometimes people don't have very many bids for connection. While what you said was true, like everybody's interested in something. So like you can try to find you, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to respond in a positive way. And the first thing that unfortunately comes to my mind is like depression. Some people are depressed and they're just not they're not making bids for connection with you. They're not really making bids for any connection with anyone because they're going through something. So that opens up a whole nother topic. But at the end of the day, we should not be afraid to be honest and say, like, I'm not feeling connected with you in this season. I don't really feel like I want to be intentional and I want to prioritize you. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways where you want me involved in your life? Like I want to be there. I want to feel connected to you. I'm assuming you want to feel connected to me. And they might say, yeah, our relationship is fine. Like it's fine. I don't want to do anything different. And that's where you unfortunately need to be honest, but also assertive and say, well, unfortunately, things aren't fine for me. Like I need to feel more connected to you. I need to feel close to you. These are the best ways that I feel close to you. I love it when you do X, Y, and Z. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's still their responsibility and whether or not they want to follow through with that. And like I'm sure we should have said this eons ago, but if you're in a stuck situation like that where you're just like, well, I've told them how I feel loved and valued, they don't seem to be following through with any of that. Counseling needs to be your best bet. There's a lot of, excuse me, from what I've seen, people struggle so much with just shame and low self-esteem. And when somebody, even when their partner tells them, hey, I would really love it if you did X, Y, and Z for me, all they hear is, oh, I'm a terrible partner. And they wish that I was somebody else and they wish that they were never with me. I'm never going to live up to their standard just because of their shame and their past trauma or whatever it is. And so they might not follow through just because of that. And so those conversations are best had in front of a therapist or a counselor where they can look at that person and say, like, what do you feel when she says that or he says that to you? And they might say, I feel like I'm never going to get it right. I feel like I'm never going to measure up. And then they can explore that, like, oh, well, there's a reason you feel that way. Let's explore that. And slowly but surely we can kind of retrain the brain to remind ourselves that she didn't call us a failure. She just said he loves it when we do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, that's really good. One last thing we'll say, and then we're going to close up for tonight. Really, just grateful that everyone hung out with us on the chat and stayed with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for dealing with our technical difficulties and sticking with us. We're just grateful to be with all of you. I saw a few things in the chat. It was like, but my boyfriend is really into like the gym and weights, which is shallow. Like, what is there to take interest in there? Or my, person is into this or that. And I would just say, like, it's not the actual activity itself. It's in expressing interest in why they love it that you get to see parts of their heart. And it might be like, well, what would be underneath something as banal as lifting weights? And I'll just give you an example. I'm a trauma therapist primarily, so I work with trauma. I know that like a huge majority of my clients have a very emotional relationship with fitness. Either they're obsessed with it and they work out a lot, or they resist it and they feel a lot of guilt for not working out more. There's no neutral opinions about physical fitness in the trauma world, at least that I see. And so like when someone's like, oh, well, their main interest is lifting weights, I'm like, oh, okay, there's a whole iceberg there. There's a whole iceberg under what it means to feel strong, what it means to feel capable, what it means to achieve a goal, how powerful you feel in your body, and what does power mean to you? What does
Mhm.
taking up space mean to you? What does being able to control your surroundings and lift heavy things and achieve hard, like that is so full and rich of emotional potential that I wouldn't want you to skip over it. I wouldn't want you to think, ah, well, my guy, he's in the weights, like that's nothing. I'm like, that it can be everything. Um, so look in, and you might find dimensions to your partner that you really fall in love with. It would be really powerful. Jimmy, any closing words?
No, the only thing that I could remember, or the only thing that, so when I read the Gottman stuff, they never failed to mention emotional intelligence. And that's one of the things that we kind of skip over how vital it is to our relationships. And that I don't mean to sound hopeless to people, but like at the end of the day, all this stuff that we talk about, it really requires some level of self-reflection. Somebody who I want to get curious about why I react that way, or why I do this, or why I respond that way. Um, or why I even or why I resist talking when when somebody brings up emotions to me. Why does that make me uncomfortable? Why do I just naturally shut down and clam up and get real defensive? Why? And that's what really changed for me. That's what started me on this journey was I had to start asking the question, why? Why do I do that? And at the end of the day, emotional intelligence really does come into play. And Gottman mentions that all the time. He just talks about we really need to be aware of our he says somewhere like if you don't understand your own feelings, you won't understand your partners, and therefore you won't be able to actually connect with them. And I don't, like I said, I don't mean to sound hopeless. I'm just saying like this stuff is reciprocal. Like we both need to be paying attention to that.
Yeah, it's crucial. Yeah, it's not optional.
It's not.
It's it's imperative that this becomes kind of a centerpiece of your relationship. That interest in love and curiosity isn't just an optional thing. It's kind of it's one of the key pillars of intimacy.
I love that.
Well, thank you, sir. What a joy to get to talk to you tonight. This was great. I'm so grateful that we get to hang out together.
I'm
Here's
so grateful
last
too.
thing. One last thing I want to say to everyone. We have one more book to give away. I'm putting a link in the chat just for the Gottmans book generally. So if you want to get this book, if this whole conversation was interesting to you, you can actually get the book. You can order it right here. So we're copying and pasting that in there. If you want the last signed copy, it's going to um where are you? Oh, your name just disappeared. All right, you better come. Better go. And it's Tatiana Lopez, and I don't know
Oh,
her last name. There was a third name.
congratulations.
Tatiana Lopez. I'm feeling it. Oh, there she is.
Let's
Tatiana Lopez Rojas. There it is.
let's do it in like a podcast format so that it's more recorded, or there's not so many glitches and stuff. We can just upload a polished product.
I agree with you. That sounds good to me too. Hey, make sure to go grab the Gottmans book, everyone. Have a fantastic night. Get some sleep. Fight right with your partners. We'll be around. We'll see you on Instagram, TikTok, all places short form lives and dies. See you later.
Thank you guys. How fun was that?
Why'd I say and dies at the end?
What did you say?
I said where short form video lives and dies. What did I? Oh.